Environmental activists all over the world face an unbelievable amount of mental, physical, and emotional pressure at the hands of all powerful corporations and governments. That pressure comes in the kind of imprisonment to physical intimidation to anonymous threats. But over the course of the last decade, we've seen an increasing trend of suppressing environmental activism in the most disturbing and permanent way possible: murder. According to a first-of-its-kind report from the organization Global Witness from 2002 to 2013, at least 908 environmental activists were killed in 35 countries around the world. And perhaps most stunning is that the problem appears to be getting exponentially worse. In 2012 alone, 3 times as many environmental activists were killed than in 2002. And now the problem has gotten so severe that on average, 2 activists are killed every single week. The report notes that many of these activists are in fact ordinary citizens in developing countries who are victims of industrial land grabs, mining operations, and the timber trade. These are largely people who became activists because their communities have been displaced by environmental destruction, while development has led to the complete degradation of their livelihoods. Countries in Central and South America and Southeast Asia are particularly vulnerable to high murder rates, and environmental-based killings have now reached unprecedented levels in these regions. Over the last 10 years, Thailand has seen 16 activist killings, Peru 58, the Philippines 67, Honduras 109, and Brazil a stunning 448 murders. Brazilian agribusiness and land developers in particular have long ignored the rights of indigenous communities and the poor when it comes to annexing land for logging and construction purposes. In rural areas where there's loose enforcement of land laws by the federal government, developers will stop at nothing to expand their ownership of pristine forest. In fact, the report notes that, quote, these land conflicts in Brazil are also closely linked to deforestation in the Amazon, which accounted for 68% of all murders linked to land disputes in Brazil in 2012. Many of these take place in recently logged forest areas, which are then opened up to further commercial uses, such as cattle farming and soya plantations. And no story exemplifies this growing epidemic more than the death of anti-logging activist Jose Claudio. Claudio was a fierce and outspoken critic of illegal loggers in the Amazon, and as a result, predicted his own death 6 months before it happened. However, government authorities refused to provide him with adequate protection. Tragically, in May of 2011, masked gunmen shot Claudio and his wife to death and proceeded to rip out one of his ears as proof of the execution. But it's not just anonymous gunmen committing these barbaric acts. In the Philippines, anti-mining activists have recently been murdered by the country's own military. The most high-profile of these cases being Juvie Capion, the wife of an activist fighting against the development of a multi-billion-dollar gold and copper mine on the island of Mindanao. In October of 2012, soldiers riddled her house with machine gun bullets, killing her and her 2 sons and sending a chilling message to other anti-mining activists. Now, it's important to note that many African and Asian nations were not included in the report as a result of incomplete and oftentimes non-existent data, meaning that the actual number of environmental activist killings is in fact much higher than 908. But even more disconcerting is that only 1% of perpetrators responsible for these deaths have actually been convicted for their crimes, meaning that governments are consistently turning a blind eye or even endorsing this deadly silencing method. Listen, standing up for the environment has never been more vital to the survival of this planet. And if we allow this movement to be suppressed by forces willing to commit murder, we'll be facing a hell of a lot more than the deaths of 908 activists.